Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Andy Graham, the ginger Zach Oshman in the back who's just branding the heck out of this with his 24/7 sports hat.
I don't think anyone's
He's
actually going to notice
representing-
that if you hadn't. I don't think anyone's going to read that, but
It doesn't matter, it's there.
there you go. 24/7
Pat Thull, if
Zach
you watch
buys Dustin
this,
the beer after.
Pat Thull, if you watch this, we expect contributions for allowing this to happen. Anyway,
Philly's planning his wedding right now.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You should let him.
I don't
Speaking
care.
as someone who just planned a wedding.
Anyway, moving on. Hey, congratulations, Pat. If you're not watching this, I know you're not. Anyway, Indiana wins 24-17, so they're off the schneid. I think it was they had lost 8 in a row. It had been darn near a year since they knew what it was like to win a football game. Yet again, it's a football championship subdivision / Division I AA, whatever you want to call it, opponent. But it's a win. It's pretty obvious this one was not an emphatic statement by any means that says Indiana is definitively a whole heck of a lot better than last year, but I mean, they at least won a game. I think there was at least a few things you saw that showed some degree of improvement, that showed they've come along in certain fashions. Andy, just start off on some of those. What were some of the things you looked at and said, this is better, at least in your
Well,
team?
Trey Roberson completing 72% of his passes. Kevin Wilson talked a lot about that during the offseason, about how in the modern college landscape, teams really need to complete at least 2/3 of their passes to be properly effective offensively. And I think Trey did that. Now, the offense kind of bogged down late, and maybe Trey was a little part of that too. But overall, I thought he looked improved in the key area that Wilson identified in the offseason. And 1-0 is better than 0-1, but something I thought was a metaphor for tonight was after the game, Indiana, it's a skin of the teeth game where they're knocking down a Hail Mary in the end zone. They were up 24-10. They looked like they were in control. They didn't maintain control. There were a lot of, just documenting the strangeness and weirdness on fourth downs in this game would have taken me an entire column. But at the end, they're knocking down a Hail Mary. Then the team goes over to the student section to sing the fight song, as is customary after a win. And there were maybe a couple of dozen students there to commune with them. And I think that's a metaphor for how far this still needs to go, both on and off the field. The performance on the field still needs to get better. The support in the stands still needs to get better. And the entire culture needs to still keep changing. And tonight wasn't the kind of game that's going to go a long way toward changing that.
No, for a lot of those reasons, I mean, it just being an 8 o'clock game, for one thing, there are certain games that you
night.
drive.
Students don't stay out late on a Saturday night.
Oh no, they do, but
they're at the football game. They're not out. Forgive me.
They are.
True, but I mean,
they're not out.
And they want something that's going to grip them anyway.
Well,
I mean, if this is Indiana, Ohio State, it's a game.
Actually, they want to grip a beer, which they can't do here, and so
That's
maybe that might have something to do with it too. But.
Right. Zach, what did you see that was better? I mean, you've been watching this team pretty close. What stood out to you and said, okay, that's at least some degree of improvement, and where did
offensive
they not
line
go?
early?
Yeah, I think Andy probably kind of teased his column a little bit, and I would, if I could tease mine, it would be that I guess there are at least some things that I'm starting to see Indiana can hang its hat on. Andy talked about Roberson. I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 passes all night that I looked at and said that was a bad pass.
Right.
A lot of the passes, his receivers bailed him out in a couple situations, but a lot of his incompletions or poor passes were, and Wilson talked about this after the game, maybe bad play calls that put him in bad positions.
There weren't easy throws. I mean, there wasn't an obvious place to go with the ball. And
the offensive line, for being so young, especially was getting really good push in the first half, and even in the second half, not really running the ball as well. But still protecting Trey Roberson very well.
Right.
And against a defense that I think the staff feared would be able to rush the passer pretty well.
Right.
And it's not like they were maybe easing that up with a lot of design runs and things like that. I mean, they were dropping Roberson back a lot, and most of the time he had time to throw.
Yeah. I can't think of one occasion where Roberson was really
he had to scramble a couple times, but
he
was never really
life.
near a sack.
No, not really. It was never really dangerous. He never really had to do some crazy escapeness.
What did you think, in conjunction with the offensive line getting a push? I thought the tailback by committee worked pretty well for a while too.
Yeah, it did, and it seemed maybe by the end of the game, D'Angelo Roberts was still running hard. I think Stephen Houston, it seemed like just wasn't getting as many holes in the second half.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll be honest, I try never to be too critical of play calling because at the end of the day, I understand that coaches probably know a lot more than I do, and they get paid to know a lot more than I do. There were some puzzling play calls in the second half, and some puzzling sequences where Indiana seemed to kind of be in control of the game. They get a defensive stop or a turnover or something, and you kind of expect them maybe to start grinding it out on the ground again. And there was at least one drive I can think of where they just came out and ran 3 straight pass plays after having a fair amount of success. I think this was early in the third quarter. After having a fair amount of success on the ground, it's just kind of like, why not go back to that? And I think we saw some of that last year where maybe the coaching staff was still kind of getting a feel for how to best use its tools.
Well, we saw that in last year's opener. I mean, the offense bogged down in the second half. It just kind of got progressively more stale.
But tonight, I don't think the offense really bogged down. I mean, I think it kind of hit a wall almost. I mean, it was still functioning pretty well. Missed 2 field goals in the second half,
True.
and then had 3 more drives die out inside Indiana State territory. So I think the offense was still functioning fairly well.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, it was almost like not everything had clicked into place.
In no way, in on those drives and just in general, they just did not put Indiana State away. I mean, there was a couple occasions when they had to settle for a field goal, missed 2 of them, one got blocked.
One got blocked.
I said something in my column, and I'm going to ask you guys if this is fair. I said down the stretch, and this is a bit of a cliche, but it seemed that way to me. It seemed like one team was playing to win, the other team was playing not to lose. I thought I saw some of that too.
A little bit.
Where they just kind of got close to the vest.
At the same time,
they got a little repetitive.
I don't think that's true on defense, though. I think Indiana actually played well. I don't even think. I think it's fair to say I know they played much better on defense in the second half. And I would also say that I saw some things on defense. This team had, I believe it was 16 turnovers and 18 sacks last year. They had 2 turnovers, forced 2 turnovers, and had 5 sacks tonight. I understand it's Indiana State, but I think everyone out there should also understand that this team was 1-11 last year and was the only BCS conference team not to defeat a football bowl subdivision opponent.
Yeah.
So progress is going to be measured differently here and this year than it's going to be in other places.
This team
5 sacks, even against Indiana State.
Yeah.
That's good. And against a team also, I think it's fair to say, established a pretty good running game.
True.
And yet Indiana's still able to get that push and still able to, I'm turning to Wilson here with the,
there you go.
But still able to get that push and get penetration from the defensive tackles in particular. I thought
I was going to say, but the defensive ends, to my way of thinking, I agree with everything you said. But you know, it's like I didn't think about a defensive end basically all night.
No.
They just didn't show in terms of.
I barely even remember who they played. Honestly, I don't even know if they had tackles.
They did. I mean, I remember
Richardson.
Obviously,
Lehan got a tackle. Richardson got in. Lehan had a tackle and a fairly big play. I remember, but generally didn't really show to the point where you really noticed them, including the passer. I mean, it's absolutely right to say that the defensive tackles got pushed impressively and got enough heat on the quarterback to really be effective. But they're going to need more, and they're going to need the ends to come off the edge better than what we saw tonight.
But again, and I'm not just trying to put a positive spin on everything, I think most coaches would rather have what Indiana has, where you've got defensive tackles that are able to get penetration and able to cause disruption, and you're going to bring the ends, and the ends still need to come along, as opposed to having a really soft interior of the line, particularly with 2 new guys, even JUCO transfers, new guys at the second level at the linebacker position, and some pass rushing ends, because if you can't stop the run or you can't control things right there in the middle, it doesn't really matter.
It does. You'd rather have tackles, but I mean, Big Ten teams are not going to give up a lot of sacks to defensive tackles. I mean, sometimes they will, but I mean, there just has to be some push from there, and you just see no evidence that it's coming.
Zach's right that they're still learning too. I saw Jakari Alexander, one of the JUCO linebackers, went out for a while after he lost coverage on a play. He's learning. They're talking to him. I mean, it's going to take some time in that regard. It's still the first game for him at this level, and for David Cooper. So I think that's part of the thing. People just have to accept the fact it's going to take a while.
It's going to take a long time. Now, I mean, I think the one thing that still does stand out, the Shakir Bell play, this 54-yard touchdown run, is the stuff that's not supposed to still happen.
No.
There was nobody there at all.
No, apparently,
the way the play was called was different. They wanted to pass rush, and they called.
They basically stunted someone out of the gap.
Alex Todd went out of the gap.
Still,
and then
there was no second level. Though.
Right. There was no second level.
There's supposed to be a safety fill in there, and there was no safety.
No safety.
I mean, I don't want to, you know, I think it was Drew Harden. I don't want to hang it on one kid because
Right.
you play with 11 out there, but there was no safety where a safety should have been.
It's
Right.
another one of those, you know, I think one of the things that particularly the defensive players and coaches talked a lot about in the offseason was, you know, what they call mental busts. I think it was maybe one of those a little bit.
A little bit.
Combined also with, again, a
Secure
play
Bell
call
being
that
pretty good.
a play call that opens something up for a very good running back.
Right.
I think we can all agree that Shakir Bell's probably better than Indiana State. I mean, no offense, but
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
ran
he had
for-
1,600 yards last year.
Right.
So
He almost won the Walter Payton Award. We're gonna have to call that one. Call this one off, I guess, or something. Anyway, thanks everybody. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but doesn't matter. We'll be back next week at
You say
UMass.
tomato,
So
I say
Yeah, we're always looking for words that we can't.
thanks,
find.
guys.